Hey, we're so back. Guess I might as well start the outro. Outro? I meant intro. Hey, friendles, I'm Kendall, and my perfectionism is so strong that I'm gonna have to stop myself from making a third Gummigoo action figure. Anyways, this is part 2 of remaking my Pomni doll and Gummigoo action figure. Except this video is mainly going to focus on the assembly and cosmetics of Gummigoo. Pomni will be part 3 of this series, and you'll see why soon enough. Last we left off, all the parts for Gummigoo and Pomni have been printed. So now it's time to remove supports. I haven't printed filament in a few years, so removing the supports for the first time in however long was definitely a callback. Especially since I don't remember tree supports existing the last time I used a filament printer. I used some 3D print pliers to cut tiny nubs of filament off of my prints, while also using some surgical hemostats to remove supports in some harder to reach places. Some of y'all might be wondering why I have a pair of surgical hemostats. While removing supports and plastic lumpies, I also used my handheld drill to drill holes in my prints. Mainly because the holes shrink in size after printing, and the holes on filament prints can kinda be non-existent. After all that, it's all about the swiggity sanding from here. While sanding, I took the time to put the pieces together just to make sure that they fit. Wouldn't want to find out something doesn't fit after painting all the parts. I learned my lesson the last time. The resin pieces are sanded, but the filament prints will need some work. I was going to use this Ladal cloth clay that I used in the process of making my Pomni doll's scaly faceplate, but when I opened the jar, yeah, that's mold. Funny how this was completely dried out the last time I used it. Well, I just ended up taking that as a sign not to drink the sink water in this apartment. Instead of using cloth clay, I opted to use some plastic wood filler from the hardware store. I could have also used some air dry clay that I softened with water and just spread that over the pieces, since it'd be easier to sand and smooth and doesn't get waterlogged like using acrylic paint and primers over this plastic wood filler, but that didn't occur to me at the time, so we're going to use the plastic wood filler that you're supposed to be using with a solvent-based primer before you paint it with acrylic on top. Learn from my mistakes. While the wood filler was drying on the filament pieces, I took some of the resin pieces with airs and opted to fill them with epoxy while I had the time. This piece here was missing a finger, so I drilled a wire hole in the base structure of the hand to give it the base of a new finger before adding the epoxy sculpt so that it now has a new middle fingus. Kind of a jump in progress here, but I sanded the first layer of plastic wood filler, and so far the results are looking pretty smooth. It's pretty good at filling print lines, but as for supreme smoothness, it is a bit softer than I'd prefer. Other than that, it was pretty alright. The body pieces are not getting put together until later, and that's because I have a plan. But for now, I gotta make sure they'll click together before I prime them. To make that happen, I drill some holes into the piece where the wire will fit in, and then I use a paint marker and dot the holes with a good amount of paint. Then I set the pieces together, leaving a paint sploosh on the undrilled piece. And then I drilled the same hole on the undrilled body piece. Using some straight wire, I superglue them into the hole of one piece, making a part A and a part B essentially. Then I just repeat this all on the other pieces in the hat. The limbs and hat will be assembled and painted first, while the body will be assembled last to set the limbs inside of it. For the time being, I superglue the hat halves into one hat. Since I had the superglue out for the hat, I thought it'd be a good idea to assemble Gummy Num's limbs. And you'd think that this be pretty straightforward. But you see, I'm kind of an idiot. So the first one went as expected, just stick part A and part B with some superglue. But it all went to heck with the second one because I somehow managed to make the hinge and the foot face different directions. So by the time I realized that, the glue was really living up to the name Super. And see, in desperation, I took whatever heavy thing I could find and smashed the leg to break the leg connection. But my mom was sleeping in the same room with me, so I ended up waking her up while smashing it. So yeah, that sucked. But reassembling and patching a slightly borked limb is going to be a lot faster than printing a new one entirely. At least, that's what I told myself. So yeah, after that heart attack, it was just more wood filler on the seams. Continuing along, I started coating the pieces in thin coats of white gesso, partially because it would help me see how smoothed out the filament pieces were, and because I needed to move along with painting Pomni's body because covering the flesh tone pieces was going to take a few coats. I decided the filament pieces weren't smooth enough, so I painted another coat of wood filler to my filament pieces, but this time I diluted it with some acetone. Do this in a ventilated area, and please, for the love of God, don't imitate what I'm doing here without proper training and safety precautions. I have experience in this. Don't imitate me. After that, it's more rounds of sanding till smooth and priming with thin gesso. While priming Pomni's parts, I mixed up an off-white color because I'm not sure how obvious this is through a camera, but the gesso is more of a cold, stark white with a bluish kind of undertone, while the white resin pieces are more like an off-white, yellowish, eggshell, beige kind of color. I touched on this in the previous video, and it happened because I ran out of white resin, which is why I had to print some of the pieces in flesh tone resin. So yeah, I mixed up a custom color and painted a few coats. Once I was satisfied with the paint job, I covered her body in a couple coats of matte varnish because at this point, if the paint were to start chipping, I would cry. With Pomni all varnished, it's time to put her together. And this is where everything went to heck. Everything started out pretty alright, honestly, putting wires in the hinges and the joints of the hands, knees, feet, elbows, sanding down paint in places where the paint was interfering with movement and all that stuff, and for the most part everything was going pretty Gucci. While plugging the wrist hinge into the arm of one hand, that hand's hinge just cracked. And I didn't think it'd be a big deal, so I decided to carry on, thinking I could fix it with a little bit of super glue. But after assembling the torso and trying to attach the arm, the shoulder cracked. You can't really see much of what's going on, but believe me, you're probably not missing much. So yeah, looks like the body wasn't coming together the way I imagined. While the ball fits in the slot of the shoulder and the hips, the shoulder themselves is a bit too fragile, and the way I structured the hips and shoulders is not as practical as I would have thought. The hinge parts of the hands are also too fragile considering how easily one of them broke, but despite that all, I can tell I'm on the right track with the hip and shoulders, and I have some idea on how to structure them differently. The faceplate, wrists, knees, and ankles are all working pretty well too, but I decided my best course of action from here was to focus on just Gummigoo. Moving on to the gummy nums, I started painting his limbs with a warm yellow and an evergreen green, painting a watery coat to hopefully achieve a smooth finish. Since chipping is expected around the joints, I decided to tackle those a bit differently. I prepped the joint hinges with some light coats of white gesso before covering them in some thick layers of pastel. Just really try to pack it in to hopefully make the flesh tone less noticeable. I also put it on this MacGyvered apparatus thingy to spray them outside with Mr. Super Clean. And then I just continued painting. I had my doubts about this, but to my surprise, multiple layers of pastel and Mr. Super Clean did the job very well. So I just kept going with it. Once I was satisfied with the paint job, I covered the pieces with a few layers of varnish, but I mixed some matte and shiny varnish to hopefully get a more satin finish on the gummy nums. Now comes time to assemble the gummy nums. First things first, I put the respective joints on the limb sockets before sticking a wire through it and supergluing it in place. Once they're dried, I place the limbs on their respective places while assembling the body, mainly to see if it's all coming together, and yeah, it definitely is. Now comes the part where I have to put the body together for reals. I wrap the limbs in some plastic wrap so the body paint hopefully doesn't get on the already painted limbs. And then I super glue the head and belly together and hope that the arms don't slip out of place. Once I'm confident it worked with the arms, I go and do the same with the legs. And now we have a full-bodied Gummigoo. To make the attachment look more seamless, I spread some more plastic wood filler on the part lines that'll be sanded and painted over. While the wood filler dries, I decided to mix up some special brown and start painting the hat, and wow, I had such a hard time with this. The brown on the original hat looks more purplish, while this brown looks like one of my elderly dog's recent accidents, and trying to mute the color with blues and purples didn't go so well, especially since Liquitex blue always kind of coagulates into this like gummy substance. That wasn't on purpose. It coagulates faster than blood exposed to snake venom, so using it can be kind of frustrating. And I couldn't tell you how I got through it, but I did. While waiting for paint and wood filler to dry, I go back and forth between working on different body parts, and as you can see here, I'm painting over the seams of Gummigoo's body in preparation for the final colors. Just doing whatever I can to maximize my time and stuff. While the body primer dries, I just went back to the hat, telling myself to trust the process. 'Cause, oh boy. Once the primer dried, I started going in with a brush, applying pretty colors, and I know from my last Gummigoo action figure and the Sunny doll I made for Callan, that gradients with brushes are not my forte. But gradients with a sponge would be a game changer. I went around the apartment to see if we had any makeup sponges, and all I could find was this giant red sponge that says muck off. Now, some of y'all might be wondering why I have a sponge that says muck off. I cut the sponge into a smaller piece, and then I cut that piece into smaller pieces, and then I go to town blending the green and yellow together. And wow, I should have done this with every other doll that required a gradient. But this leaves a uniform finish without watering down the paint too much. And you can bet your sweet tushy I'll be doing this to apply gesso for the rest of my life. After a while of splooshing paint, the plastic on the limbs was honestly starting to get in the way, so I opted to take them off and just be careful while painting and sponging. Once satisfied with all the colorful spongerooning, I use white on the belly and the eye to sharpen edges that have gotten accidentally splooshed in color. We're not done just yet, but we almost are. Most of the hat fixing was done off camera, but it looks just like the original. I hope. The final step is to varnish the boy in multiple coats of varnish, using gloss and matte varnish mixed together on the colors for a satin finish, and matte varnish on the eyes and belly, just slathering on multiple coats in hopes that the paint doesn't peel. But it kind of did on one spot, but we don't need to talk about that. And after all of that, the boy is finished. Comparing him to the first one I made that can only swing his limbs front and back and he can't even sit on his own, the resin is heavy despite being very thin, and also that head magnet thingy, this ain't it, chief. The new Gummigoo, on the other hand, oh my Lanta. He can sit, he can move his arms and leggies in places that have never been imagined before. He can do yoga and just splay it all out there. I know that you're probably thinking, but what about Pomni? Well, she'll have to be the focus of the next video. This body is okay, the hinges move well, but I've got to fix things like the broken wrist and the shoulder before continuing. And while she's a lot more flexible and professional looking, I guess you could say, compared to my first Pomni doll, her legs are too long and her head is kind of tiny too. It looked okay digitally, but in my hands, So I'll be fixing those and essentially giving her all my attention for the next month. Stay tuned for that, if you have the patience. If you'd like to see more from me, please check out my card linked in the description for all of my social medias. I usually call out my website at this point in the video, but my website is currently under construction, blah blah blah. I keep saying I'll have it back up soon, but I don't. But if you see my alias change a little bit sometime in the future, it'll all make sense. Other than that, I hope you're doing well, and if no one told you today, the world wouldn't be the same without you. Know that you're valued and you make my world a better place every day. Happy April Fools, happy Passover, happy Palm Sunday, hope y'all did your taxes, happy Good Friday, happy Easter, happy Earth Day, happy Cinco de Mayo, and Shalom everyone.